I've been telling people lately that we're doing somewhat of a roundup on various legislative views from the state capitol as we finish the legislative session. And in fact, I got an email this morning from the Democrats, and it's been a long time since I've had anybody from that side of the aisle on the air with us. And looks like in a few days we'll be doing that as well. But we're talking to some of the Republicans, especially some of the Republican newcomers who are really getting their first experience of how this whole process tends to work. It's 7 minutes after 8 o'clock, almost 7 minutes after eight. It's 44. Bill Cowley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Also joining us at 8:40 this morning, Randy Staples from Idaho Weekly Briefing for his weekly update. And then just after 9 o'clock, we're talking with a local historian who's written a new book, and he has a book signing coming up in just a few days. We'll be talking about that. But in the meantime, we'd like to welcome someone who has an extensive, call it a very extensive resume before she got into government. She had a background in education and business, and that is State Representative Dorothy Moon, and she's joining us on the air for the first time. Welcome to our program.
Oh, good morning, Bill. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm wonderful. I got a nice weekend of travel, and of course, going around Idaho anywhere is always a treat for the eyes when you get to see all of the beautiful sights. And as I understand it, you actually own one of those sites. Did I read this correctly that you are part owner of a gold mine?
I am, and I can't wait to get up back to Stanley, east of Stanley is where I live, up the Yankee Fork, and we're really looking forward to getting up there and having this snow out of the way so we can start cracking up some rocks and looking for that gold.
Well, I think we'd all like to be able to do that from time to time.
It's a fun way of life, I'll tell you that.
It's a little bit, when it comes to dollars and cents, sometimes, though, a little bit more troubling in places, I guess, finding money for various state programs when you're actually legislating. And we were talking off air, and you were explaining that you're a little concerned about a proposal that the governor is backing, which you believe could be throwing, I guess, good money after bad.
Bill, I do, and I appreciate that. This House Bill 190, we heard it in the Education Committee over a month ago, and the governor's office is proposing that students who have left college or dropped out in the past can come back to school and receive a $3,000 scholarship for up to 4 years to complete their education. And this is all at the expense of the taxpayers. And when we have a situation with the roads like we do, I just don't think this is really a good bill to be passing at this time. And it wasn't a good bill when it came to the Education Committee. There were so many holes in it. There was no accountability. There were no requirements for these students as far as GPA goes. So they could have come in with a D-minus GPA and possibly have been awarded one of these scholarships. And when you're from a rural district like I am, and you see the economic situation for a lot of my folks in Lemhi, Custer, Boise County, I have a gym in Valley County also, but in these really rural areas, they can't afford to pick up somebody else's college expenses. To me, it's just not even warranted. This bill should not even have come up this year.
Does it look as if it's got any serious support on the floor?
I'll tell you what, I think it's pretty well split. I do know that there's been some amendments that were made to it. So after the Education Committee heard it over a month ago, it was pulled to what's called the amending orders. And in the amending orders, there were probably 5 to 6 people on the committee who wanted some things changed. But even with those changes, one of the really important ones that I believe that did not make it into the bill was the fact that if we were going to pay for people to go back to school, that they should at least be going into fields of study that we have jobs ready for them. And the Idaho Department of Labor puts out a report called Idaho Occupations in Demand. And I'm also on the Commerce Committee, and the director came to present what jobs we need filled in this state. And also with that occupations in demand. It lists 50 occupation vacancy rates in Idaho, and it tells you what we need. And I tried to put that amendment onto this HB 190, and I couldn't get it through. And I think that was highly unfortunate. So literally, we could have somebody, and I'm not saying anything against pencil drawing, but if you got a BS in pencil drawing, yeah, it's great if your name's Leonardo da Vinci. But as far as trying to fill these jobs in the state, where there's 28,000 vacancies, I think we should at least be focusing on careers that will go into those areas.
Mentioning that, you come from you're representing at least some rural areas of the state of Idaho, and obviously there's this critical need. We've seen a lot of job growth in the state, but one of the knocks I've heard often is that we're not talking about a lot of high tech growth, in the sense that the jobs are generally good for entry level, but you're not going to be able to raise a family or buy a home on the salaries that a lot of these jobs pay.
Right, and that is a problem. We do need people. We do need a trained workforce, but I guess how much of the state government, how much do the taxpayers have to carry that burden? And again, I think there's larger issues looming. We have, in Lemhi County, when I was going around meeting with folks prior to the election, we have people who have had to lay off employees. They're doing without health care because of the Affordable Care Act, and they're paying penalties. How do we ask them to pay for these Band-Aids, what I consider Band-Aids, because our kids aren't coming out of the high schools with a diploma that really carries a lot of weight? We have Boise County. We just had the Pioneer Fire. We've had businesses that had, a half year of retail sales because they couldn't get the folks there with their tourism dollars to support the community. How do I ask those people who had such a dip in their economic situation to support paying for other folks' college? It's just not right. So I understand that we do need people in these high-tech jobs. And we have a lot of opportunities around the state with online studies, and people can do that. But I think right now there's a lot of folks that just cannot have another dime squeezed out of their economic situation to pay for it.
As you mentioned, some of the conditions because of the fires last summer, and I drive up to Idaho City now and then and tour that area when I get a chance during the warmer months, if you will. But I would assume too that the double whammy with all of this is the road conditions, just from what I've seen in this area. And I drove up to Sun Valley yesterday, and on some side streets in some of those areas, you're looking at huge craters in the roads, and I would assume that in the counties you represent as well. Uh, you throw in what happened last year economically because of fires, and now how are you going to get truck traffic in and out a lot of these places because of road conditions?
You're right, and Stanley was actually blocked off for over 2 weeks. Galena Summit was closed, Banner was closed, and in a real rarity, we had from Stanley going east to Chalice was closed, and that for over 2 weeks. And the students who were living in Stanley couldn't get to Chalice to go to school because Stanley has a K-8 school, and beyond that they have to be bused an hour drive to Chalice. Well, they had to go south toward Arco and come around on Highway 93 to get to the Chalice school, and they were staying with friends and family while the roads were closed. So no groceries were going in. Mountain Village, the largest employer in Stanley, had no huge events going on, so the snowmobilers couldn't get there. All of the winter recreation were denied access, and I mean it's just because of Mother Nature, and those things happen. But this was a bad winter, so we have Stanley that was in a lot of trouble, and then we have Lowman and Garden Valley snow slides, numerous ones, and right now there's a huge one that's reblocked Banner Summit, so we can't come from the west. If we actually finish session this Friday, for me to go home, I'll have to go around through Fairfield and up through Sun Valley instead of going across through Banner. And I expect that's probably going to be closed for a few weeks because it's about 80 feet in depth.
I was going to say the snowpack I saw on the level yesterday, just in Haley and Sun Valley, was already impressive, and I think there's more snow coming. So there's
Yes.
no real relief anytime soon. Uh, want to point out we're at 816 and we're at 42, and our guest is Dorothy Moon, and she's a member of the Idaho State House of Representatives, joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Coming from these districts, everybody, you represent obviously somebody from Ada County has a different set of sometimes issues they're looking at. There's got to be some very specific things that as a rural representative that you look at that don't match necessarily what everyone else is doing.
Yes, and one of them is transportation. You know, we have a lot of miles to cover. In fact, Legislative District 8 is the largest district geographically in the state. It's literally the entire center portion of the state. It's often referred to as a helicopter district. And when you look at the miles, even to go to a sporting event when we were at Chalice High School, when my boys attended there, we'd be driving 200 miles to go to an event. We travel a lot of miles. So when it comes to gas prices, when it comes to registration fees for your cars, I mean, these are big concerns. And I know that was passed in the other session, but we need to really look at that for the expanse of our state. It's just huge. And I know we have a lot of road issues. I know we're going to cover those. That's most important, is to make sure that people can get from point A to point B, and goods can be carried on these highways. So I think that's something we're all feeling. I know even in Emmett, my Jim County area, the roads there are breaking up horribly. And again, it's a matter of getting around and getting to Ada County, because a lot of folks in Jim County do work in Ada County and just come over the hill to, go to work. So we need to keep those roads open. We need to get those potholes filled, and it's bad everywhere around the state. And I think that's priority number one, and should be with the legislature and with the governor.
We've got about a minute before the break, and the representative is going to stay with us for about another 20 minutes or so this morning. Just quickly, I overheard Brad Little at a meeting on Friday chatting with somebody who happened to be there about this new study that says we are dead last when it comes to internet speeds in the state of Idaho. And I know in the rural areas, there's even more concern about that.
There is. Well, and where I live, my family, we live off the grid. We don't have a cell phone service. We surprisingly do have internet, and that's what allowed us to move up there with my husband being an engineer. He's able to receive points and do his drawing, so it's nice when you can work your job from these remote areas where you want to be at. And I know that in Idaho City, they have a real problem with connecting. I know you can even go there, and the only place you can pick up cell service is right by the visitor center in Idaho City, and that it's a real hardship for them, especially being as close to Ada County and to Boise, 45-minute drive, and you lose cell service, and it is tough, and we do need to expand those services into the rural areas.
Well, we've got more coming up with Representative Dorothy Moon in just a couple of minutes. It's 42 right now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on look at that. We just jumped to 44. Nothing permanent in this world. That's on the way on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Just a quick reminder, we thank you for listening this morning, but if you're having a difficult time hearing the program, it may well be what's going on between your ears, and you may need a hearing checkup. And in fact, we've been telling you all about Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And a lot of people say, well, why would I drive to Rupert to actually have my hearing checked? Experience. Dr. Christine Pickup is a certified audiologist with over 17 years serving the hearing impaired of all ages. True diagnostic testing will help you to know what the causes of your hearing loss happen to be, and will lead to the best treatment options as well. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today, 208-312-0957. We're at 8:23. Our guest is Dorothy Moon. She's a state representative joining us this morning. It's 44. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. And Representative, people often will say, well, okay, you're a Republican, but we should point out that Republicans don't always see eye to eye on every last issue. And sometimes you think the party itself could be a little bit more muscular.
Well, you would think so. And the platform from 2012, which I consider myself someone who actually does follow the Republican platform, all we ask for is, fiscal responsibility with our government and, personal responsibility. And, so when you see things like HB, 190 coming up, or excuse me, 109 coming before the people, and we're wanting to pay for folks' tuition, what happened with personal responsibility? I know when and I don't want to harp on that for too long, but I know that when I went to college, it took me 7 years to get my bachelor's. I worked my entire way paying for it. And then when I went to get my master's, I was an intern and I taught labs for a science class to pay my way. There's nothing wrong with people paying their way through school. I was actually at the Custer County Lincoln Day event, always on March 4th, and I asked over 100 people to raise their hand if they paid for their own college, and everybody raised their hand. I said, how would you feel about paying for other folks' college? And no hands went up. There weren't any takers. So anyway, I don't want to belabor that, but I do think personal responsibility in the Republican platform is something we need to encourage. But another issue with the Idaho State GOP, I used to serve on the Resolutions Committee because I was also Legislative District 8 chair, and that's how I was able to fill that position. There are seven regions in the state, and each region gets 2 representatives to come to a meeting in the winter and in the summer with the state GOP. At that meeting, our state, around the state, in our county Republican groups, they sit there and they think about, what resolutions we'd like to see passed, what issues we'd like to see addressed in the legislature, and they send them forth to the state GOP. They prepare a packet, and then in winter, at the winter meeting and the summer meeting, they hammer through those resolutions. And, it's amazing to me, the Article 5, which was a big issue over a month ago here in the Capitol, the Article 5 issue came up, and in the Resolutions Committee meetings, I was in 4 of them before I became a representative. All 4 of those unanimously said, no, we don't want the Constitution opened up. We don't want an Article 5. We don't want a convention of states. We don't want a balanced budget amendment. And what's the first thing and the most important thing that they want to try to pass here in the Capitol is the Article 5. And amazingly, the amount of energy that goes into trying to defeat these efforts is tremendous. And it's the same people all the time. They come from every corner of the state to come and testify against these endeavors. And really it needs to kind of stop. After a while, we should realize the majority of Idahoans are not for opening the Constitution. They want to honor and adhere to the Constitution, and we need to follow what the people's will is, and we don't. Another issue is that has come up repeatedly in the Resolutions Committee is that the committees in the legislature are selected by, at least in the House, by the Speaker of the House. So when we come in, they look at our areas of expertise and where they want to put you, and they put us in certain committees. Luckily, I got into 2 of them I wanted to be in, was one education because I'm an educator, and in commerce because I'm a business owner. And then I was put in energy, environment, and technology, which is fine, but I really wanted to go into resources because I have a master's in resource planning. Hopefully, that'll maybe come in another year or 2. But anyhow, on these committees, the Speaker also appoints the chair and the vice chair. And a lot of times we have the same people who are in these positions, and it would be nice to get some new blood, I think, so that we can have the meetings run differently. Maybe we could actually get some of our bills heard instead of being drawered. But at the Resolutions Committee meeting, they had brought up that the committees need to select their own chairs and vice chairs. So once the 14 or 12 people are put in committee, they get together and pick the person to run the committee. And that has never been brought up, even though it's been passed by the grassroots in this state numerous times. And then, of course, Common Core, SBAC, and data mining. Those have always been voted unanimously to remove those in the state, and it's not big issues. And I know the standards have been reworked, and they're saying, they're not Common Core, but there's a lot of overlap between the standards we have now and Common Core. So that's just some things that I think the citizens need to be aware of, is that we need to start holding the Idaho State GOP's feet to the fire and make sure that whatever we suggest at these winter and summer meetings carries through to the legislature and to the governor.
We've got to take a short break again, but we're going to spend a few more minutes with State Representative Dorothy Moon. Just a quick note, I've got to tell you, I have an email from a mutual friend of ours from over in Minidoka County who was a school teacher, and she writes, "It's not the job of government to fund everyone's child's education." So there you go. We were just talking about her off air earlier, and got an email and
Great.
pass that along. We've got more on the way with a representative just after the break. It's 8:30, 42. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Just a quick note. Well, first of all, we're at 44 still, holding fairly steady in the low 40s today. It's 8:34. We are, after enjoying some really nice weather over the last 10 days, we're going to get a cool spell again and maybe even some snow showers from time to time. If you're having difficulty with your furnace, you need to call the folks at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Telephone number 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Our guest is State Representative Dorothy Moon, and she's with us for a few more minutes today, and then we'll be joined by Randy Staples coming up from Idaho Weekly Briefing just after the break at 8:40. Representative, you referenced the Republican Party, and obviously you've had some long-term involvement with the party itself. I read a lot about the so-called group of, I don't know that you have an official caucus, but it seems that, according to media, you have an official caucus, and yet I see more agreement among Republicans in the House than I do disagreement. And do you think sometimes those of you who are relatively new or that you're known in this group as the six-pack, that you get a bad rap more from media than anyone else?
Really, Bill, I think so. And I think they're just looking for stories. I did an interview the other day for an Eastern newspaper, and the headline was they were saying that I accused people of lying, which never came out of my mouth, and I was kind of shocked. I just said some statements were untrue. But, they're always trying to beef up those headlines, and I think it's really disingenuous for them to do that. And I do think that I can speak to any of the legislators here. If I have a bill that I'd like support on, I go around and I visit with them. I think in general a lot of us are in agreement, but then there's just sometimes again, people are representing their areas, and like you said, I'm more of a rural area compared to urban Ada county. So there's some differences of opinion there where the fund where funding should go. But other than that, I get along with people fine. And as far as the media trying to place us in certain categories, I think it's just to help sell papers, because I truly do think we're getting things done. There's a couple of bills I would have liked to have seen go through, but I'll tell you what, next spring, January, I'm going to be on top of the one I want to really work on and move it forward.
I was going to say, this is a relatively, well, you've been obviously involved in politics for a long time, but as a relative newcomer, I'm sure there's a few surprises, but the longer you're there, you're going to get better at sort of working the hallways and figuring out ways to get things done.
Right, and I guess the hardest thing I had to deal with was realizing that the lobbyists take precedent a lot of times on these bills than the legislators, and to me that's all wrong. The legislators are representative of the 55,000 plus people in their district, and I think our bill should come first. Yes, we have to deal with the rules of different administrative offices, but if we have a bill that we need to bring up, we need to get it heard first, and I think that's where where some of the frustration comes in, because we are here to do a job for our people in our area, and if when you're put off and put off, that's where some frustration comes in. But again, I think you're right. You become more seasoned and you understand how the process works. And believe me, I know how the process works. And next year, you're going to see I think, some bigger things move through.
Um, for people listening today, and we've got about a 2 minute window here before we have to wrap it up. But if they'd like to get in touch with you, is there, other than just email, specific way to do that?
Sure, sure. My office phone is 332 1180, and I can be reached there. And also, our email is pretty much our first initial and last name, so it's dmoon at house.idaho.gov if they do want to email. But otherwise, no, our phones are always available, and they can leave messages, and I will get back with them as soon as I'm out of committee.
I was shocked last week when one of your colleagues shared that the lobbyists actually outnumber the legislators by about 4 to 1.
I know. I was kind of shocked about that too. But no, they're all over the place. They're here. That's for sure. Full force.
Are many of them former legislators, or is that just people who come in professionally to the lobby?
Well, I think a few of them are, but most of them are professional lobbyists and hired. And I thought some lobbyists just dealt with one issue, like the gas and oil issue in Gem County is huge, and but the people who lobby for the gas and oil company, they also lobby for other entities, and so you understand that they're aligned with numerous different groups, not just one.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your time today, and hopefully, when we wrap up session, we'll be doing sort of a round of these again with legislators, and we'll be able to do, for lack of a better set of words, a postmortem on the session. And we'd like to see you back.
Well, Bill, I really appreciate the opportunity, and Magic Valley is great, and I'd look forward to visiting with you again.
Well, thank you, and good luck out on the floor today.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, take care. State Representative Dorothy Moon joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Just a quick note, Randy Staples on the way in just a few minutes from Idaho Weekly Briefing. Randy had a column yesterday that I don't normally do this with fellow columnists, but I had to question him about some of his points. We may be able to talk about that coming up in a few minutes. It was about the climate hearing that took place last week in Boise, where they had a big crowd. Then again, you have a university there. Why wouldn't they show up?